right, everybody, welcome back. We are on Focus on You with Phil and Oscar. Yes, I said Oscar because, I just like to mispronounce his name. And so today we are just going to continue the conversation with the Ula family that we had on before with Mona and Aaron. I thought it was an excellent conversation and a conversation that we don't always like to have. So, we just have to face facts and the truth about things. And so, Aaron, thank you for coming back and for staying behind to have this with us. For those of you who just tuned in to Focus on You, of course, with Phil Oscar, we have Mona, who's our ULA life coach. Hello, Mona.
Hello.
And her good friend, Aaron. Aaron, can you introduce yourself again? Just tell us who you are, what you do, and just tell us a little bit about your story.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, go ahead.
So a little background on what I've done. In 1999, I became a firefighter paramedic. At the age of 30, I progressed into critical care nursing, worked in the children's ER, children's pediatric ICU, and the adult ICU. Got my master's in nursing education, went on into teaching at a university in BSN program. There, I started teaching palliative care end of life is what I taught. And I saw a lot of that at the bedside in the ICU. I experienced my own personal loss in 2016 when I lost my mom to stage 4 breast cancer in July. She was diagnosed in June. Lost my dad 3 weeks later to a heart attack and lost my grandfather 3 months later. So 2016 will forever be etched in my heart as a year of loss for me. So went on from there. So teaching that was therapeutic in a way for me. And then last December brought that all home into I embrace loss and death. Became a ULA life coach myself. So learning how to live life with purpose and by design has been a passion for me as well.
To live life with purpose, learning to live life with purpose. I love how that just kind of like came out to your conclusion, right? Because your journey just kind of like led you more in understanding what life and purpose is all about. Tell us about your experiences, even as being in the nursing. And thank you, by the way, for your service as a nurse. We really do appreciate the nursing community, especially in this time where we're experiencing COVID and things like that. But even otherwise, we really appreciate that. But tell us about some of your experiences as a nurse and working in the area that you do.
I'll tell you, when I got into nursing, so I was a firefighter paramedic for 6 years, went back to school for nursing school, and then was in pediatrics, started as a nurse in 2009 in pediatrics. And actually did that because that was my weak spot in my nursing education was pediatrics. So I wanted to challenge myself in that. So I did that and then transferred over to the adult ICU. And that was in 2012. And I want you to know that in the first 6 months in the adult ICU, I saw more death than I had from 1999, starting as a firefighter, to 2012 when I left the pediatric world. I saw more death in the adult ICU in 6 months. And I stayed there 8 years. So that was an eye-opener for me. I wasn't sure. Originally, when I started in the ICU, I wasn't going to stay there long. I was going to get my experience and become a nurse anaesthetist. That's what I was going to do. And obviously, God had different plans for me at the time.
Obviously.
Obviously. So I did. I experienced a lot of death with my patients, but I have always, and many of my friends, I can't speak for every nurse out there, but for majority of the nursing world, they are heroes. Those that have been in the trenches, literally, of ICU and ER and throughout the hospital for the last 18 months, they really are heroes. And for most of us, we treat our patients as if they are our own family members. So we become very connected emotionally, sometimes, more times than not, emotionally, if we lose a patient, because we become connected to their family and to them. We get to spend time with them and hear their stories and hear their pains and their struggles and learn from their families as well. And so when you treat them like your own family, that loss is heavy.
Mm-hmm.
That loss is heavy. I think you're able to move on. Obviously, I remember all the people, some more in detail than others,
Right.
that I lost. It's a little easier to move on in life because they aren't your family per se than when I lost in 2016 with my mom, my dad, and my grandfather. That was a lot harder to move on. And nobody nobody knows about loss and grief until you've experienced it.
Mm-hmm.
I actually had a sister-in-law, and I try to give my in-laws and even my husband a lot of grace, and family and friends a lot of grace with that death, because a lot of times if you haven't experienced, you don't know what it is. So I'm very grateful that my husband's parents are still alive. The only loss that they have had is like grandparents, a few uncles, and a few cousins, but they still have their parents, they still have their siblings. We have all of our nieces and nephews. We haven't had a great loss within my husband's family per se. And so I remember after I lost my dad, before my grandfather had passed away, one of my sister-in-laws calling me, and she's like, "I'm so sorry for your loss, but you'll be better in 6 months." And I was like,
Oh,
there's a time limit?
excuse me.
I said, okay, well, I tell you what, when your mom and dad are gone, we're going to revisit that conversation. I'm going to ask you in 6 months how you are. I handed the phone back to my husband. I was like, I don't want to talk to anybody in your family. And literally the only ones in the family that I talked to for a very long time was my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, because they had both lost their parents. And my mother-in-law had lost her mother. Her mother was in her 40s. She had lost her to a massive heart attack very abruptly. And so she's been gone quite a while. My husband never knew his grandmother. And so those were the only people that you find your tribe, you find your people, even
you
in
do,
loss and
yeah.
grief.
Mm-hmm.
And those were the only people that I could talk to, because literally I could be in a room and not have to say anything. I could be crying and it was okay, because they understood that. They had walked that walk already. They had gone through that journey and grieved their own parents. And so I remember in less than a year's time after losing my grandfather, I was coming home one day from work in the ICU, and I always called my mom on my way home to tell her how my day was. And I picked up the phone to call my mom. And when I realized what I was doing, because I still have her phone number in my phone, I still have her picture in my phone, I still have that. And I picked up my phone and I started calling my mom. And when it started ringing, and I realized, oh my gosh, I hung it up and I just started crying and bawling. And I get home and my husband's like, "Why are you crying? Did you have a bad day? Like, what happened?" I'm like, I tried to call my mom on the way home to tell her about my day, and I just miss her so much. I want to hear her voice. She was my biggest cheerleader. I want to hear her reassuring thoughts, her wisdom. And he was like, "Really? Like, you hadn't gotten over that yet?" And I was like, and at the time I had my dog. He's since passed as well, but I'm like, I looked at my husband and I probably had this evil look. I probably had steam coming out of my ears or whatever. And he just kind of stopped. Exactly. I was like, ah! I didn't say anything though. And then what's funny is prior to that, a few years prior, I just didn't have a filter and I would just say whatever came out. But I didn't say anything. And I grabbed a glass of wine and I started to walk out and to sit on my back porch to watch the sun go down and be with my dog. And I turned around and I said, you know what? That was a stupid comment, but I'm not going to hold it against you because you still have your mom and dad. And so one day, and I'm grateful you have your mom and dad, but one day you're going to know. And I want you to remember this. And I said, but for now, I'm going to sit outside. I'm going to have my glass of wine with my dog, and I don't want you out there. I don't want you to come sit with me.
Right.
And so I did. I went out and I sat out, and towards as the sun was almost behind the trees and all that, he did come out and he sat down, and we didn't say anything. Probably silence between us for about 5 minutes, and he never even looked at me. He just said, I am so sorry, but sometimes I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
And that was the last time he's ever, it's been like 5 years, and that was the last time if I come home crying and I say, I miss my grandfather, I miss my mom, or whatever, he'll just reach over and he gives me a hug now. Like, you don't have to say anything. Give me a hug. I'm good.
Yeah. It's so funny because you never really, I hate when people use the term get over. Because when somebody has been impactful, and we're not talking about just like, impactful as in, your coach, you won a game together. Yeah, that's, that that was, I missed the coach because, we won 2 games together. Right. Impactful is when somebody's influenced your life so to the point where your personality, your mindset, a lot of your attributes come from this person, and they've influenced your life in such a way that you are who you are because they were in your life. You don't get over that. I don't care what anybody's. You might stop grieving and come to terms of acceptance, but you don't get over.
Yeah, it's like cutting off your thumb, and people go, oh, you'll get over it. Like, no, every day I know I'm missing a thumb. There's this part missing that I'm used to using every day, and now it's not here. I'm not getting over missing a finger. I'm accepting it. I'm learning to work around it. There's, but not getting, that's just not the right word. And again, what I say,
you get over a cold.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I just got over COVID. Like, you get over that, a little virus.
Right. Little thing, little that. But yeah, I don't think you ever get over somebody who has influenced your life like that. And I give you a great example because I didn't even know we were going to talk about this today. But I was, and I hadn't had a chance to tell my wife about it. But I was driving home this morning because I went out to pick up a friend of mine and drop them off. And suddenly there's a gentleman that was in my life years ago, and he was an influence for years in my life, and he passed away from cancer. And I had to experience him going through that period of cancer, and it was hard to watch, hard to experience, very hard to face, right? And so just today, I was just driving. It wasn't even on my mind. I just started missing him. I was, you just kind of, your mind just runs across the person and you start remembering certain experiences. And it was a very simple experience. The experience, we were just kind of like sitting in the car and we were having like a one-on-one conversation. And I just remembered his face and his expression and just, how wise he was. I could go to him with certain things, and he just had such a wisdom about him. And sometimes you think you can have that conversation again, and you remember those things and you miss the person. I believe that emotional memory is a lot more connected to, remembering the past in a more affectionate way than logical memory. So logically, you can dismiss something and say, compartmentalize and go, okay, this is useful, this is useless. But emotional memory is just like when you have a good memory, is just as efficient as when you have a bad memory. We avoid certain things because of bad memories, and we gravitate to other things because of our good memories. And so that was a great memory, and that's going to be with me forever. And that person is attached to that memory, right? So I commend you. I mean, just even having to be in the field where you see people just kind of like, especially around this time of COVID, where, you've seen people, just passing on. And it's hard for some families to even accept that.
So I want to bring up a thing, because you just said that I'm going to have that forever.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not going to have it forever, because we have a finite life.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an Indian mystic, Sadhguru, very popular, and he says, it's your life ticking away 1 minute at a time, not just time ticking away. And if you realize that you have a finite amount of time, to use that time wisely and not just, whatever I'll do. No, say something to someone you haven't seen in a while,
Mm-hmm.
because you never know, like you said, that they're gone.
So no, I'm talking about the memory, not the person.
But you can't, like, I'll put off till tomorrow and call the person up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
So
I agree with that.
Those memories are part of the memory you don't want to have, is like, I didn't make that phone call.
Right.
I didn't stop over and say hi. I didn't, miss that last opportunity, because, hey, I got plenty of time and they have plenty of time.
In Mona's program, right? Mona, you've been quiet.
No, I'm waiting for my
that's a first.
in.
Go ahead, just jump in.
No.
Jump in.
No, I wanted to link this back to the conversation that we did have in our program previously, and I wanted to link it to Oscar, the experience that you had lately in your mom passing. Was your mom able to speak with you openly in regards to, this is how I want my last, months, days, hours to be? And were you as a family able to have that open-hearted conversation with her? And I'm only assuming, only because I know you and I've heard snippets of stories with your mom, but I'm pretty sure she was quite vocal and expressive in her wishes.
Yes, her I think her great line always was, "You guys are really going to cry when I die, because I don't have insurance." So that's that's her sense of humor. And our family has had a lot of loss in the family, but I think my mother and everyone in my mother's side, we know death is coming, and it's not like a shock, and it's like, I miss my mother, but it's not this grieving, because we've worked on it. And she's been sick a long time, and broke her hip, broke her hip twice, and had COVID in the same year, and got over it. So,
and she was in her 90s, right?
No, 89.
89. Yeah, almost.
My father's 96 and a pain in the butt, and he's all over the place. I call, he's living in Argentina. I call him up, and his wife said, "Where's my father?" He's out shopping. He'll be back in a little while. So that's, and his grandmother, my great grandmother, died at 105.
Wow.
So we have long telomeres in the family, and my mother had said something: enjoy your life now, because you're going to be dead a lot longer than you're alive.
I love
Wow.
That. It's like, so it's always been like, we have a finite amount of time. It's not like, we're going to be around forever. You're like, I'm going to go soon, and and that's that. So it's not like a shock that you passed away, and then you go like, I should have done this, I should have done that. But it's like, okay, we did what we did in the time we had, and that's how we deal with it. It's like, did the best we can when we when we were there. That's why I say don't put off till tomorrow.
I mean, go ahead, Mona. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so you would say, again, referring to the program we just had with Aaron and talking about the importance of talking about death over dinner. And it seems like you and your family have had a very healthy relationship around that. So would you say that that has helped you in your grieving process, and something that, you would recommend other people as well to just open up and talk about it?
Yeah, I think, I think it's an American thing that you like, death doesn't, you don't talk about it. It's not there. I mean, they're like the Mexican Day of the Dead, where you celebrate your past. Coco, great movie. Watch that if you haven't seen it. And other cultures that celebrate passing, and in other cultures, passing is just part of living. It's not like, oh my God, they died. Like, we never knew they were gonna die. Like, and Sadhguru, says, you're one day closer to death. If you're 3 years old, you're 9, years old, you're 50 years old, you're still one day closer to that end. So keeping that in mind as you live your life, like, I think, I forgot what the number was, but I think it's, if being born and dying at a certain age is only like 10,000 days. Some like idiotic number that's like, wait a minute, that's just not that's not a big number. So if you're 50, you're down to like 5,000 or whatever but it's like this really wild number that when you look at it, the number of days, and do the math because I forgot what the exact number was, but 365 days times X number of years is the expected days that we have. And
one of our mentors in ULA, Dr. Troy, he has 2 jars of marbles, and the average life of an American male, I think, is 70, 75, say, for example. So he took the 75 marbles, and then for every year he has lived, he has them in one marble, and then for every year he has left, he has it in one jar. For every year he has left, it's in another jar, and then he has one marble in the middle. That signifies. There we go. I do speak English. Signifies this year. This is the year I'm living now. I'm never going to get this year back, because once I put that in my lived years jar, I am 1 year closer to the inanimate. And I think that is also just, you have it in front of you, visually. And I think that's pretty cool as well.
What I wanted to ask Erin about was her experiences during COVID, because she talked about that on your show for a little bit, but I'd love for her to share that again, some of the experiences she had with different people having different experiences or different emotions closer to, when they realized that this was real. Tell us about that again, Erin.
So I actually left the bedside New Year's Eve before the lockdown, about 2.5 months before the lockdown, going into March. And again, I feel like God had that hand in all of that. Like, I had another part of supporting my very dear friends that were in the ICU, that I needed to help support them, and not just necessarily at the bedside taking care of it, because you don't have time to take care of your coworkers while you're taking care of family, COVID patients, and other patients, and your family, and all that. You just don't have time. So, like, my mission, I feel like, looking back, was really to have a lot of faith and pray for the patients, pray for my coworkers that I wasn't in the trenches with anymore. But I lived vicariously through several of them that are still remain in the ICU. And I'm an empath, so I can feel what they're feeling. I've experienced so much death already that the only difference between what's happened in the last 18 months is that we've thrown the world into, you cannot participate in the death of your loved one. And all of that falls on the nurse, not just the caregiver of the nurse, and then the family's going to come in at visiting hours or walk through today, and they're going to sit with their loved one and hold their hand. Like, no, like, it affects everybody across the board, that family could not be with their loved ones while they were dying. So the patient aspect in talking with my friends and letting them, you know, air their grievances, air their heartaches, and use me as a sounding board to talk with them. The patients that came in very acutely, like straight from the ER, if they weren't already intubated, straight to the ICU, they had a lot of fear in their eyes, in their emotions, in their whatever their last words were. There was a lot of fear in that. And those that went from the ER to the floor and got worse, they were allowed that time, whether it be days or weeks even, like they had that time to go through all the grieved steps, the anger, the bartering with God, you know, all the way to the acceptance part. They had that ability, so that when they did get to the ICU, my friends say that the emotion that they had was more regret, that I have things that are undone, things that are unsaid. And so, you know, help me to tell my loved ones that I love them, so that they know that that's the last thing I tell them. So that was kind of the experience from there. My nurses, I mean, in my nursing friends we talk about, so many of them most likely have undiagnosed PTSD, because this was traumatic for them. This was, I mean, I carried a heavy load losing patients that I had, but now they were carrying the load of losing the patient, but not being able to have the family there with them. And so that added a whole new dimension to the sorrow and the grief, and added anger, and added frustration. So
right.
While we have had compassion fatigue and burnout in nursing for years, I mean, we've been short-staffed for years. Now we're even shorter staffed. And then you have all of this now. You have families that are angry. So you're the one trying to care for their loved one, and they're expressing anger because they can't be there. They have to be on an iPad or an iPhone or whatever. So you're getting it from all different directions. And so my friends had many, many different emotions going on pretty much all at the same time.
Wow.
Guilt, like, do I even go home? I was taking care of 2 COVID patients today. Do I go home? Like what do I do? And then when you get home and you're home, and
you're thinking,
you're constantly thinking, you're stripping down. When I was at the fire department, before I came home, you know, from a hazmat scene, or you go on a scene, like, you strip down, you take everything off, you go shower before you come in, and you hug your loved ones. And that's what they were doing, almost like they had been in a hazmat scene all day long. And so then you come home, but then you're like everybody else, you're covered with the guilt. Well, I can't see mom because I've been exposed to these sick patients, even now, and they do that now. So when they have a COVID patient come in, which is less and less, but when they have a COVID patient come in and they're assigned to take care of the patient that day, again, you're like, well, I can't go see my family for like 3, 4, 5 days, you know, however long I'm off, because I've just been exposed to this again. Am I going to expose somebody else? So there are so many fear and regret, I would say, from what I have lived through my nursing friends, is what the patients are, and fear as well. I mean, fear is just taking over everybody. And I know that when I was going through my loss and trying to make some decisions, because I found out shortly after my mom died, breast cancer. I have a history in my family, and I was genetically tested, and I was high risk for breast cancer as well. And going through so many different decisions of care and treatment, and what would this look like, what would that look like, I was having to make a decision. So I had prophylactic surgery. And in coming to that decision after an MRI revealed some things that I wasn't quite happy with. when I heard the radiologist tell me that, well, you're having cellular changes, but it's not cancer yet. That last word was like,
yet. What does that mean? What does that mean?
Here,
yeah.
I spent a lot of time in prayer. I spent a lot of time with my husband. And I remember thinking, well, do I have surgery? Or do I continue having a 3D mammogram, ultrasounds, MRI every year? Because every time you go to do that, you hold your breath. Like, is this the one that's going to say you have breast cancer now? And it plays with your emotion. It plays on your mind. Just like with COVID. I mean, I had COVID, was getting over for 3 weeks, and it's not just a physical thing. It's an emotional and a mental and a spiritual thing, because about halfway through it, you go through these stages of a little low-grade fever, spike fever, got a little cough, and you're like, what is next? What does tomorrow bring? And I literally had a breakdown, emotional breakdown midway through this, because not knowing we have so much fear instilled in us. But I remember a friend of mine telling me when I was going to make that decision was that, Erin, if something gives you angst, you're making your decisions and you have a lot of anxiety about that, that is not of God.
Right.
But if your decision that you make gives you peace, that is of God. And so sitting with that and praying about that, and I'm Catholic, so I go to adoration. And so sitting with God in the adoration chapel with Jesus, and like, do I do the surgery? I've never had surgery before. There's complications to go with that as well. And just having that peace and learning discernment, learning to listen, not just ask the questions and do the talking. I mean, God definitely wants us to have that relationship with him, but then sitting still and listening, and then having that discernment. And so I do feel like in all of this, we cannot live in fear, and we cannot make decisions in fear. And for my nurses, my dear friends, we're very faith-filled people. And I know when I had my breakdown with God, and I called one of them, like, I'm gonna have to go to confession, because I just cussed God up one side and down the other, and I blamed him for everything in the world, and he's looking at this and he knows it's going on, he's not doing anything about it. And she's like, he's got big shoulders, Erin. Like he can handle that. He can handle anger and all that. But I remember at one point, after crying and having my fit, and my husband was at work, so I'm all alone. And again, you think you're the only one going through this, and you're isolated. And I remember finally just submitting to God and like, okay, you know what, God, like, if this is my time to go and this is what it's going to be, just make sure I'm surrounded with the right people, that I'm made comfortable, and I'm ready to come see you. I'm ready to get out of this place, and I'm ready to come see you if you will have me.
Wow.
And after that, there was a lot of peace to whatever was going to be. And I do believe that in whatever we're doing, whatever stressors in life we're at, whether it be grief or loss, is to turn to your faith, whatever that looks like for you, is to really lean into that and dig deep in that and find that ability to have that peace. And it doesn't always come at the moment, doesn't always come quickly, but it will come if you keep leaning into that. Like, it will come.
Wow.
That's why I feel like those death, and Oscar missed our call, but Oscar, like, Reid, let's talk about death over dinner. It's a framework in being able to have that conversation about death at the dinner table while we're breaking bread in a safe place with friends and family, and we're learning, what are your wishes? What does your end of life look like? And what are your wishes? And how can I make that come true? How can I honor that? And when you're having that, like, that just gives you peace.
Right.
Because death, as I talked about with Mona, like, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't decide, only the Catholics are going to die, what race is going to die with ethnicity. And the other thing I got, like Oscar has longevity in his family genes, obviously. And I used to say, and this was one regret that I had with my mom. My mom lived in Houston. My dad and my grandfather lived in San Antonio. So my mom was 69 when she passed. My dad was 72, and my grandfather was 94. Well, 93. He would have been 94 had he made it to his birthday in January. And I remember on my grandfather's 90th birthday being here in Louisiana, and we were going back, and my mom said, "Are you going to stop and stay with me?" And I'm like, "Oh, Mom, like we have work, we have this to do, we have that to do. Like we are just blowing through Houston. We're going to go to, and Grandpa's turning 90. Like we don't know how long we're going to have left with him."
Wow.
And I did it again when he was 91. And I did it again when he was 92. I barely had time to get to Houston to visit. I talked to my mom a lot, but barely had time to go and see her and spend time with her. I would stop on my way through Houston and have coffee with her at Starbucks. And then go. So the one thing that would really hit me hard with that was that death doesn't discriminate with age either. I've worked in a NICU. I've worked in a pediatric ICU. There are babies that are born every day that, like Oscar said, that don't make it. And then there's people that live to be 110 years old. Death does not discriminate. Your age has nothing to do with that.
So real quick, my great grandmother, well, I don't know if you can see the picture here.
Yes, kind of, sort of.
She's phasing in and out. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's ghostly.
Since her 60th birthday, would every Christmas would say, "Well, this is going to be my last Christmas with you guys because I'm 60." And she ran that line for another 40 years. Yeah, so, let me see if I can, hold on one second.
I love that. Oh, yes. Oh, wow. Is that you, Oscar, with her?
That's me.
Oh, beautiful.
Great grandma was an elf, pretty much.
I want to say a quote that I tell my nieces and nephews, and a lot of people. I always say, "Hey, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone." So kind of like your mom, you know what I mean? Like, you're gonna miss me when I'm gone. You better appreciate these moments. Exactly, and
and I think Woody Allen said it best. He says, "I don't mind dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens."
My uncle said in the Marine, he was a Marine, he would say, everybody wants to die, or everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die.
Right.
That's incredible. And that's so true. That is definitely the truth. But Aaron, I'm glad we're having this conversation. I'm sure there's so much more that we could talk about, but we're running out of time.
I just want to wrap this up because I tried to get a hold of you while me and Aaron had our program, and I was trying to get an in here, but I think this is something that I would challenge you, Phil, and Aaron to continue this conversation. And how well does the church deal with that? How well do they, handle the conversations? Are our churches able to talk about death over dinner as well? Is that something that comes natural to?
That's a very good question. Very good question. Yeah.
The bishops will have a feast over this conversation. And to have somebody like Aaron present, I think.
Right. That would be great.
Yeah. So I'm putting it out there live. So.
I'm sure at least one or two of them are going to watch this. They're going to be like, yeah, that'd be great. That'd be a great person to have on. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, Mona. Greatly appreciate it. Aaron, you are a blessing. Thank you so much. And Oscar, of course, this is with Phil and Oscar, so you're permanently etched into the PNN family. You're on lockdown, Oscar. Lockdown.
Listen, I had a race in we're up to putting in sheetrock and insulation on some houses of the 500 displaced families here in Mamaroneck that were knocked out by Hurricane Ida. So yesterday's show.
Oscar? Where are you at?
I'm in Mamaroneck, New York, which is on the north side of the
near
Long
White
Island.
Plains,
Yeah.
right?
And,
Near
and
White
you have
Plains.
people from Louisiana all the way up there?
Oh,
I'm in Louisiana.
and that's what I say to people when we're working on the houses. I'm like, listen, we're doing this repair and all this gutting, and it's 75 degrees. They're doing this in Louisiana at 100.
Wow.
So it's as bad as it is here. There's a
I
whole
prefer,
bunch of,
whole preference there. But thank you guys again for watching. Thank you, everyone. And we will see you again next week and focus on you. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Sorry. I clicked the wrong button. Look at that. Boom.
And we're back.